Elijah and Amy got married right after graduating from college at the age of 22. They had already been living together for some time, so making their union official was merely a formality. There was no grand wedding, much to the disappointment of their parents. Elijah found work in a factory related to his field, while Amy took a job as a salesperson at a cosmetics store. She had initially tried working in her profession but found it unfulfilling, ultimately settling for retail because it offered better pay. In addition to her job, Amy had been involved in a local theater for the past 2 years. Though it didn't bring in much income, she treated it as a passion project, constantly expressing her excitement about the magic of the stage and how fulfilling it was to be part of it. At first, Elijah wasn't entirely supportive of the time Amy spent at the theater. He struggled to understand why she was so committed to something that was both exhausting and unpaid. But as time passed, he softened, seeing his wife return home after performances, glowing with happiness and carrying bouquets of flowers. He accepted her devotion to the stage. Amy, in turn, appreciated his effort to be understanding and supportive of her passion. Earlier this year, a new actor joined the theater group, Nick, a man around Amy's age. They connected instantly, developing inside jokes that only they understood. Their colleagues often teased them, joking that such close friendships rarely remain platonic. However, both Amy and Nick dismissed the idea, assuring everyone that their bond was purely innocent. That assurance didn't last. During a cast party one Saturday night, one drink turned into several, and the lines between friendship and something more blurred. Amy and Nick, both intoxicated, ended up in a dressing room where they crossed a line neither could undo. The next morning, shame consumed Amy. She had a few days off after the incident, but instead of enjoying the break, she was tormented by guilt. She berated herself for what had happened and debated whether to confess to Elijah. In the end, she convinced herself that it had been a drunken mistake, a one-time lapse in judgment. Since she had no intention of repeating it, she saw no reason to shatter her husband's trust unnecessarily. But when the time came to return to the theater and face Nick, panic set in. She considered calling in sick, but she couldn't bring herself to let down her colleagues. Her role was irreplaceable. So, reluctantly, she went back. One evening, while preparing for their final rehearsal, Amy was alone in the dressing room tidying up her makeup station. A knock at the door startled her, and when she turned around, Nick was standing there, already dressed in full costume and makeup. Before he could say anything, Amy rushed to apologize. She insisted that their night together had been a mistake, that she had been too drunk to think clearly, and that it needed to be forgotten so they could salvage their friendship. But Nick's expression darkened. He had clearly been hoping for a different conversation, for her to confess her feelings and embrace him again. When he leaned in for a kiss, Amy stepped back, dodging him. "Oh, so that's how it is?" he muttered. Amy's heart pounded as unease crept in. "You're making a mistake," Nick added, his voice laced with something unsettling. "No, I'm not," she replied firmly. "Listen, Nick, I'm married. I love Elijah." And Nick cut her off with a smirk. "In that case, I'm guessing you wouldn't want to find out just how talented you are with your mouth." Amy's breath caught in her throat. Her stomach churned at the cruel implication. Tears welled in her eyes. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Nick stepped closer, grinning like a predator. "Don't play dumb, Amy. I want you." That evening, Amy's turmoil was evident in her performance. She stumbled over lines, lacked energy, and delivered a lackluster show. The director scolded her harshly, and in the middle of the lecture, she broke down, fleeing to the dressing room. That was only the beginning of the nightmare. Nick started showing up uninvited whenever he pleased, cornering her in the dressing room, making demands in exchange for his silence. Amy felt like a pawn in a game she had no control over, a trap, a plaything with nowhere to run. Disgusted with herself for giving in, Amy felt trapped by Nick's threats. It was agonizing to realize that someone she once saw as kind had turned into something so vile. Meanwhile, Elijah couldn't ignore the drastic changes in his wife. She had grown distant, avoiding intimacy with excuses of exhaustion or persistent headaches. Her withdrawal crushed him, stirring a deep fear that she was being unfaithful. The thought terrified him because he had lived through it before. Years ago, his own mother had betrayed his father and walked out on them both. Elijah had watched his dad struggle alone, completely shattered, and had sworn he would never suffer the same fate. If Amy was cheating, he knew he could never forgive her. But confronting her directly felt overwhelming, so he hesitated. He still loved her. He had pictured a lifetime together, a home filled with children, and one day grandchildren. But with each passing day, his heart warned him that the life he had envisioned was slipping through his fingers. Then fate intervened. Amy had landed her first leading role in an upcoming production, and the pressure was overwhelming her. Her nerves were unbearable as she prepared for the big night. Elijah had told her he couldn't take time off work and wouldn't be able to attend. In reality, he planned to surprise her, to be there for her moment of triumph. When he arrived at the theater, the staff recognized him instantly and led him backstage without question. Holding a bouquet of flowers for good luck, he searched for her dressing room. Without knocking, he pushed the door open only to freeze in horror. There she was, kneeling before another man. Shock slammed into him like a punch to the gut. He yanked the door shut, his heart pounding in his ears. For a few agonizing seconds, he stood there trying to process what he had just seen. Then, slowly, he opened the door again. The two had scrambled apart. The man was hastily adjusting his costume while Amy clutched her stage dress to her chest. Her face was ashen. Elijah met her eyes and saw sheer devastation in them. Without a word, he dropped the bouquet onto the floor, cast one final glance at them both, and walked away. He drove aimlessly for a while before finally pulling over. Turning off the engine, he slumped against the seat, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Rain pounded against the car's roof, mirroring the storm raging inside him. It was over. Every dream he had built with Amy, every hope for a future together, had gone up in flames, leaving only wreckage behind. For a fleeting moment, he considered calling his father, asking how he had survived the same kind of betrayal, but he quickly dismissed the idea. His father was old now. There was no point in reopening old wounds. This was his burden to bear alone. That night, he waited at home. Around midnight, Amy finally stumbled through the door, reeking of alcohol and clutching a half-empty bottle of liquor. Elijah had never seen her like this before. She collapsed to her knees at his feet, sobbing. "Please let me explain," she begged, her words slurred and shaky. He said nothing, taking his silence as permission to speak. She poured out everything, every lie, every secret she had hidden over the past 2 months. Through broken sobs, she confessed it all. Elijah listened, but he felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just numbness. As one human to another, he pitied her. No one deserved to be blackmailed, but as the man she betrayed, he knew there was no path forward. Forgiveness was impossible. Pretending this never happened was unthinkable. It was over. They parted ways soon after. The apartment belonged to her, so Elijah moved out. Mutual friends occasionally updated him on her life. She had quit the theater, found another job, and lived alone. Though she tried to rebuild, something in her had changed. She struggled to form deep connections, always haunted by the past. About a year and a half later, she finally got close to someone new. Hopeful for a fresh start, she allowed herself to believe in love again. But fate had other plans. Her new partner left her for another woman, one who was pregnant with his child. Even after the divorce, karma seemed to follow her, a constant reminder of the choices she had made.